Hey there, welcome to another video, repair video. This time we're going to do something on 11-inch Macbook Air. Model is A1370. This is the same for 1465, which is the newer model. They're exactly the same in terms of parts, most of the parts and the types of the repairs. I'm not going to do the screen on this one. There is no reason for the screen. The screen works perfectly fine. The problem with this one, on the other hand, is the keyboard. Something was spilled on it and the keyboard is acting up. Instead of typing the regular letters, it's typing some hieroglyphs, some weird stuff. So we're going to replace it. The keyboard itself is damaged. I'm going to show you what it's doing. Okay. And open the sticky notes. Okay, there you go. So I'm going to zoom in so you can actually see what it's typing out. Yeah, sorry. Okay, so you will see pretty much that it's not typing the regular letters, it's typing something weird. Those are not letters, I don't know what this is, but apparently the problem is the keyboard itself, and we're gonna replace that. Zoom up. I'm gonna show you what to do to replace the keyboard. Now, replacing the keyboard in this computer does not include replacing the whole upper piece, top case, how we call it, or the palm rest. It requires only replacing the keyboard. So if you go somewhere to a repair shop and they tell you you need a whole thing, and then they want to charge you more money even though they're not replacing what they told you they will be replacing, you just need this. On the other hand, next to this you will need a set of screws. I'm going to find the screws for you in a second. There you go, the baggie of small screws. We will need almost all of them. Next to the keyboard you need a flathead. Not really flathead, but you know, I'm sorry, you really need a flathead. There will be a lot of small screws to unscrew. A pentalobe to open up the bottom, and a T screwdriver, which you will need to take off the screws from the motherboard. So let's start by opening up the bottom. You need a pentalobe screwdriver for that. There are 10 screws on the bottom. Unscrew them all. I'll give you a heads up on this model. This one does not have a backlight, so I will not be replacing the backlight with this keyboard. I will also show you where the backlight will be getting plugged in if you do have a model with a backlight. This one doesn't, so I will not be able to replace it also for you. But just as a heads up, the models that do have a backlight on an 11-inch is very hard to take off. Sometimes you will rip it. Be prepared to replace the backlight altogether with the keyboard itself. There are 5 screws holding the battery. Remove all of them, they're in the corners, and one is in the middle. So remove these screws. If you're not sure exactly, if you do this repair and you're not exactly sure where to put these screws back in after you assemble the computer, put them in some order so you know where it goes. I've done so many of these repairs that I know exactly where these screws go. I don't have a middle one, but it doesn't matter. You can just unplug the battery, switch it off. There's the keyboard, which we're going to be replacing. Unplug this cable. There's the cable that connects the keyboard to the trackpad. The way how this works is keyboard is connected to the trackpad, after which the trackpad is connected to the board, and that's how the whole thing works. So we're going to start by taking off these little screws holding the components. There is one screw holding the DC board, which is just a simple screw, just holding DC board. Take out the SSD drive, unscrew all three screws that are holding the fan. Now be very careful. The corner of the fan has one screw that is a little shorter. Keep that screw on the side, remember where to put it, because if you put the longer screw there, you will rip off the little screw holder that holds it, and then that might cause a problem later on. This little cable, pull it up, don't rip it, just pull it slightly so you don't damage the connector itself. It's plastic, it's very easy to break. Plastic outside. Fan, right there. It's a flex cable with a little latch. Disconnect the flex cable by pulling the latch up, and then you can pull out the whole cable from the fan. Put it down. There is another one over here, which is connected on the DC board. DC board is the board that gives you the power to the computer. That's where you plug in your charger. Pull that out. Don't rip these cables off. Another cable is here that holds the speaker, and another cable that is the camera. Right now, when we unplug this, we can unplug the DC board from the main board, set that on the side. Now check for screws on the board that are holding the actual motherboard down. You don't need to remove the heatsink, so don't bother with that. There are a couple of screws, I think 4 or 3 on this one even, holding the motherboard. Unplug the LVDS connector, pull the latch up, pull this out. Just as a heads up, if in case you want to unplug the LVDS connector or mess with it before you unplug the battery, don't. You can blow up the fuse like that. You don't want to blow up the fuse. Another speaker on this side. And antennas, antenna cables for Wi-Fi. Unplug those. Don't rip them out so you don't rip out the little connectors. That's it, that's the logic board of the Macbook Air 11-inch. Now, like I said, this model doesn't have a backlight. So it just has this black strip which kind of protects the board from the keyboard itself. Keep it. It's good to have it there because the board can get shortened with the keyboard. If the keyboard lays down over the board, you don't want that to happen. So try to peel this black piece off nicely. It's pretty strong though, this layer usually won't rip. But if you're peeling the backlight off, it's very easy to rip it. In most of the cases, the backlight won't come off nicely and you will rip the backlight completely clean off from the keyboard. Okay. Cable got stretched a little bit. Now let's take the speakers out. There we go. Speakers are out. I'm not sure where all the stickers are here. This case might have been replaced before. Okay, now it's time to unscrew the keyboard. There are screws going only around the keyboard. They are very small black screws. Unscrew them. I never counted, to be honest. There's plenty of them. That's how much I can say. There is enough of them to make you go crazy, but it's a job that needs to be done if you want to replace the keyboard. Now there is another thing that I'm going to show you after I take the screws off. Not the whole keyboard is actually held by the screws. Part of the keyboard is held down by little metal bolts. It's kind of bolted into the case. Now this is a reason why a lot of repair shops or techs don't really want to do this, because they need to replace those with screws afterwards. Those little bolts are just covering small screw holes that Apple conveniently left there, and you get these additional screws. which a lot of places where you can buy the keyboard will sell you with the keyboard. They will charge you maybe like $5 per bag or something like that, I don't know. But you will need them. Without them you can't really do this repair. And they will go in these spots wherever these bolts are ripped off, and they leave the actual hole under it. Be aware that not all the bolts are going to leave the hole. Some of them are going to be sticking out. Those are the ones that are kind of just holding the keyboard in one spot. Don't worry about that. It will still hold the keyboard well. There is one very important thing when you take these screws off. When you put the new screws in those little holes that are going to be left over, screw them in very tightly. Because the screws are very small, the screw threads are also very short. If you bang on the keyboard, you will rip these screws off and they will fall in, and you will have to open it up and tighten them up again. So what we're going to do now, we're going to lift the side of the keyboard little by little. You see they're snapping off. They're flying all over the place. What I like to do is just rip the whole thing. You don't need to worry about the old keyboard. The old keyboard is damaged as it is, so dust will clean later. And it's time to put the new keyboard in there. There are these little guiders that will put the keyboard back in place. Make sure the keyboard is flat and nicely in there, that it's not sticking out anywhere, that all these little bolts go through the keyboard, the ones that are left and the ones that are not there, you will put the screws in there instead of them. What I like to do first, I like to fill the little holes that are left first. So look for them on the bottom. Wherever you find the hole, screw in the screw. Very tightly press down on it. There is not too many of them. On 11 inch there is more of them on 13 because it's bigger. But either way, it needs to be tight, it needs to be done properly so the keyboard, so you don't get that harsh, sharp feeling while you're typing because you're scratching on the metal when the key goes in too deep. Most of them are on the top of the keyboard, which is where nothing is really holding them. On the bottom, the battery will be holding them, so that's why there's not too many of them on the bottom. I'll screw in the side also. But I always like to do the middle first because I use these sharp screws that are there originally. Because the new ones might not be as sharp, might not dig through the little holes that well, and it's better to use them where you already have the screws, where you had the screws laying before. Now this is a very easy job in general. It just can be a pain in the butt putting all these screws back in there after taking all of them out. This is nothing. I'll show you how to do a keyboard replacement on a 13-inch unibody or 15 or 17, they're the same. There is about 100 screws holding that keyboard to the case. You don't have to rip anything out, the keyboard comes out nicely and easily, but you do need to unscrew 100 screws, very small ones, and then screw them back in. Again, one of the purposes of me doing these videos is to discourage the people that don't really think that they can do it themselves if they're thinking about doing it themselves. Especially like the screen on a MacBook Air, 13-inch, 11-inch as well. If you're not really confident and you haven't used these type of tools or these type of techniques before, just say no. You don't need to have me fix it. I'm not doing it because of that. If you want me to fix it, just contact me, but you can have anybody who knows this, just better not to damage something that hasn't been damaged already next to the part that you're trying to replace, because it might cost you much more money. A lot of people don't realize that and they still go ahead and try, and then they end up banging their heads on the wall. Why the hell did I do this? And they end up in the Apple Store. Apple Store says, oh, this is going to be this much money, and then they feel even worse. Okay, we're almost done. Just the bottom row of screws need to be there, and that's it. For the 13-inch you need much more screws, for the 11-inch not as many, but you still need an additional 10 screws or so. Okay, they're all over the place. There are these specific screws for these keyboards, so you gotta use them. There's nothing else that you can use. Some of them are really bad. They won't really cut through the hole that was left there, but some of them are really good. These are not that bad, these are okay. Now, after you're done with all the screws that you actually managed to screw in, take a look and see if you missed any of the holes. If there is a hole, instead of a little bolt in there, put a screw. You need it. You can apply a lot of force on these screws so they go in. Just don't, you see I approximately always do 3-4 times in one spot. Don't do too many times so you don't actually destroy the hole, and then nothing will screw in there afterwards. And then you end up putting tape to hold the keyboard or something like that, which it's not going to hold it well. And you see my cat climbing on the table. He likes to see what I'm doing from time to time. He's very curious. Yeah, don't have your cat sniffing around the screws. Might lose all of them. Okay, put this black strip back on there. Tape this back. There's these little guiders that you will use to put this back. Can be a little bit painful, but sometimes, because I'm not using the backlight here, if I would have been using the backlight, this would have gone in so much easier. Okay, put these over. Okay, so you're ready to put the parts back in now. There is no particular order in which you can put this back in. I put in the DC board first. Put the screws here. There you go. Don't forget to connect all the black cables that you pulled out. You forget a cable or two, something will not work. There is a reason why it's there. Here to go. And I'm going to leave this video. I'm not going to do it again just because my cat climbed on the table. Okay, put the screws that are holding the motherboard back on there. Okay, connect the Wi-Fi antenna. Don't pull these cables, you might damage them. might trip up the little connectors on the top. You don't want to do that. Okay, put this cable back the way it was in there. Now if you have a model that has a backlight on it, you will put the backlight on top of the keyboard instead of the little black strip I had there, and the backlight will connect right next to the keyboard cable, the trackpad cable. Now here we have the trackpad which we are connecting the keyboard to. Lift the little latch. This is usually glued, so pull it out, flex it over the connector, because the cable connector goes in from the other side, and slide it in. There's not a lot of space, so it might be a little bit difficult. You put the keyboard back on, press it down, it's going to go back. Can put this LEDS connector back in. Be careful not to damage any of the pins in it. So you get the picture back on afterwards. Now the fan cable, very important to go in there. If you don't put in the fan cable, which is kind of hidden under the SSD drive, you won't notice it if you put the SSD back on there. It will not spin and your computer will overheat and shut down because of that. Okay, so we're going to put these screws back on the fan. Like I said, be careful with that one shorter screw. It goes in this last screw hole that you will see me put it in. Very important not to pull one of these long ones because it will rip the little screw holder on the bottom, the thread, and the fan itself might start rattling later. So this is the shortest one. A little cable that goes actually first the speaker. The speaker, and then this cable that goes from the same board to the main board, another speaker. Now sometimes you will actually find that in this case computer had some liquid damage. Sometimes you might find that the damage actually went on this little board from the trackpad, and that's the reason why the keyboard doesn't work. You might want to try replacing that first before you do the keyboard, so you don't do all this work for nothing. If you see any liquid residue on that, just try replacing that first. That might be the reason why a keyboard doesn't work. In some cases, that might be the reason why the Macbook doesn't even turn on. If you open it up, take it apart, take the motherboard out, and see that there is no liquid damage on the actual board, there is a high chance that this, either the cable that connects it to the board is damaged, or that little board on the trackpad. But the board on the trackpad is part of the trackpad, so you need to replace the whole thing. Don't even try peeling that off. It's not easy, and you might damage the trackpad. You can actually replace that, but it's a pain in the butt. Don't even bother with it. Might as well replace the whole trackpad. I'm gonna close it. I usually put just 2 screws to test it, make sure that everything works before I close the whole thing up. So the main thing is that the computer actually turns on after the repair. Okay, turning on, and that means that this fucking keyboard is either dead or wasn't plugged in properly. Now, this is a pain in the butt. Which means that I have to do the whole thing all over again. There we go. I guess the keyboard slightly got moved on the side, the keyboard connector. I do apologize about that, but it happens. It turns on now, and let's see what we did. It will give you this error after you unplug the battery. Just connect to your Wi-Fi and go to time settings and then put it back on the proper time. It will do it automatically if you choose it to do automatically. If you don't choose it to do automatically, you gotta do it manually. Let's see what we did with the keyboard. Okay. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I always test the whole keyboard, all the keys on the keyboard. Make sure that all of them are typing. You might have replaced the whole keyboard and only one key doesn't work. Unfortunately, you gotta do it all over again. Okay, just to show you. The actual letters are there. Not like the last time. So I'm gonna flip this, screw the keyboard back in. And I'm still not gonna edit this video because good thing that I made a mistake, so you know, in case you do make a mistake, you know exactly what you might have done for the keyboard not to work properly. So you open it up and know what to check. Don't think that the keyboard might be bad because it might be good, like in this case. Okay, we're gonna close this, put all the screws back on the bottom. Again, you need a special pentalobe screwdriver for this. You can't. I think I got my modified keyboard on there. The video itself is about 30 minutes. It doesn't take 30 minutes to replace the keyboard, it's much faster. But like I said in previous videos, I'm doing it always step by step so you see exactly what's done and how it's supposed to be done. Any questions, just either private message me or just post it below the video. See you in the next one.